Wind me up.
Wind you up? Okay,
Yeah.
I can certainly do that. So, Jim, we've talked about for months that the biggest issue that is going to happen in our industry, especially for manufacturers, is the loss of subject matter experts and what happens next after manufacturing companies start to lose those subject matter experts.
I've been thinking a lot about, as industrial insight, what is the problem we help manufacturing companies with, right? Obviously, we work with time series data. So what? What does that actually help you do? And I think one of the really biggest use cases we have is trying to transmit SME knowledge into a younger workforce. And you look at what's gone on since, say, middle of March, really probably the beginning of March. Here we are toward the end of June. Who knows when we'll get to, put this out. But, here we are toward the end of June. So, coming up on 4 months worth or 3 full months worth of travel restrictions and things like that. So SMEs can't, often you have a small number of them that travel. You put them in a corporate group and they travel around to all your plants. They can't do that, right? So how can they do their job right now? And my thing all along, since I started getting into this, working with time series data is, well, a lot of the SMEs that we work with, like, why can't they do what they're doing from wherever they happen to be in the world? Why do they have to fly to Spain or Russia or Brazil or France or anywhere else in the US just to be able to go solve a problem? When a lot of times what they're going to do is they're going to go get a bunch of data and analyze what's going on with that piece of equipment or with that process. They can do that from anywhere. But yet companies have still been putting them on a plane, go work with these people and go solve this problem. And I think that is something that, if nothing else, this pandemic should teach all of our customers, and really pretty much anybody in manufacturing, that people ought to be able to solve problems from pretty much anywhere, wherever they are in the world. And I think that is something that has really, to me, come to the forefront. And I just worry that when things go back to normal, whatever that looks like, whenever that is, that companies are going to forget that. And they're just going to put people on planes again and you need to go wherever. And I just think that's wrong today. I think it's ridiculous. And there's a caveat to that, right? Sometimes people working shoulder to shoulder with people is still valuable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I love talking to you on Zoom. We do it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But I also really enjoy when you came to Florida and we went and had lunch and we hung out and, really got to know each other. There's something different about that person to person, face to face interaction, and sometimes, the SME is to help transmit some of their knowledge or whatever. Sometimes, and to build that relationship of trust, sometimes that face to face interaction does help. So I'm not saying, we'll get to a world where, that never happens, but I'm just saying the reason why they go is going to be different than because they have to solve a problem, right? And maybe to build relationships and to help them solve the problem. And they have to go physically put their hands on the machinery or, go physically observe something, that you can't get through a camera or whatever. So,
One of the things that we're both worried about is at some point, many of those longtime SMEs are going to decide that the continued travel, I mean, it's a grind on the best of days, but with all of the restrictions, with the worries about getting sick, with everything else that goes along with that, at some point, if we don't allow these SMEs flexibility to do more work remotely, we're going to lose them a lot quicker than if we do give them some of that flexibility. And Jim, I know that we're both worried about what happens when those SMEs start to.
so I was thinking about this, I did that one video on LinkedIn that I think got what, like 13,000 views or something like that. And it was something along the lines of, despite all of our technology, our equipment's going to run worse in the next 5 years or
Mhm.
10 years if we don't change some things. And that resonated with so many people. I had so many people who I had no idea who they were comment on that in support. Like I heard very few dissenting voices. There was a couple that were sort of dissenting, but they were the younger crowd. They weren't people that have been around a long time. And, you know, my prediction still remains in the next 5 or 10 years, our manufacturing equipment as a whole is going to be less productive than it is right now, despite all of the great technology that we can put in place. Why? Because no one knows how the equipment really ought to run. It hasn't been properly modeled and validated by the SME. So I listened to a podcast. My friend Lonnie Bowling posted this. I think the guy's name is Steve Bartos from Worthington, wasn't Worthington Industries, they're a steel company. And one of the things that they did with their operators, they were doing a rolling mill. So this was, if you've ever been around a rolling mill, basically they're reducing the size of a part. It goes through these mill stands, like I know I've been around like Nucor, they take an I-beam, right? And they're trying to reduce the size of it as it goes through these mill stands. And it was really interesting to hear him kind of talk about that. And he said, we got all the operators in a room. And Bob ran it different than Charlie, who ran it different than Steve, who ran it different than Dave. And they had this subject matter expert who's like way out ahead, and he's doing all this crazy data analysis and all this. Well, they got those 5 people in a room. And they really analyzed the data to figure out, okay, who's really the most productive? Like, what are the proper machine parameters to run this part or this product or that product or that product? And, you would think, the operators would give them pushback, right? Like, oh, well, I do it the best. Well, and that was what Steve was saying. He's like, that's kind of what we were expecting. But they were like, hey, you showed us the data. We see who ran it the best. We see what parameters need to be run. And we talked about why. And it makes sense. That's what we need to do. And how many companies are doing that right now? Like right now is the time. Right now. How many people are doing it?
Before you said that, I would say 0, but I guess 1. I'm willing to go with 1.
I guarantee it's being done in pockets. It is. It is. We worked on one with one of our paper customers probably a couple years ago, and that's exactly what they were trying to do. They had a huge turnover in operators. People have been running the machinery for 20, 25 years. Now all of a sudden you have machine tenders that are like 3 years experience. And they didn't really have the tools they needed to know like how to keep it between the ditches. And that was what they're working on, was that, like, how do we keep it between the ditches? And, they had a subject matter expertise who's working with the operations team to figure that stuff out. And we were kind of helping doing some of the data analysis side. But it's pretty rare. Yeah. And so, and that's one of the things that I see this, when we try to do data modeling, for some of our customers, like if we try to do it by crew, there's this like kind of weird tribal knowledge. Bob comes in and says, well, why did Charlie do this, man? And he turns a couple of knobs, does a couple of things. And then, Steve comes in and he turns a couple of different ones. And then John comes in and he turns a couple of different ones. And then Bob comes back in. He's like, man, why did everybody turn everything? So he turns them back the way he knows how to run it. And is that right? Nobody really knows, right? Nobody's really delved into it to physically explain, why did these settings run better or not run better? And, here's the reality. They all probably have some setting to the right, but nobody's probably hitting optimum. But if you all sit down in the room and you get the SME together with them, you'll figure it out. And I'll give you a case in point. So I remember, here's an example I think might resonate with a lot of people. So when I was working for OSI Soft, I went to the Jack Daniels distillery in Lynchburg, Tennessee. I was living in Memphis at the time. And I had been introduced to them, and it was funny because they were like one of the target accounts. Like I wanted to go call on them because they're, this premium brand and one that, Tennessee is very, very proud of. I'm like, they need to be running pie, right? And I went to the facility and I met with my contact and we talked, and, it was a pretty good meeting and stuff. It was more like technical on the pie system and stuff, but I went and did a plant tour after that. They have all these plant tours and you can do tastings and all that. And I can't stand whiskey, so that was out for me. But I did the plant tour, and I remember them saying that it takes operators like 2 or 3 years before they're really proficient to run that process. 2 to 3 years. And the final process, they have this charcoal that they use. It's I can't remember the type of wood, but they make the charcoal right there. They burn it, right outside, and make their own charcoal. And it's a charcoal filter, so it's bourbon goes through this charcoal filter, and then it becomes whiskey. And when how they figure out when to change the charcoal filter?
Taste.
Human taste. They have tasters who have been around for years and years, have been trained on what it should taste like. All right, so let's say that's Nancy. She comes in, she's got a little bit of a cold. Her taste buds are a little off that day, or she's in a bad mood that day, or in a great mood that day. Takes a taste. Does it really taste the same as it did yesterday? Maybe. When I went back to visit them, I said, here's the thing. I said, you're relying on humans to taste this. And I'm not saying that's bad. I think that still probably is going to be a part of this. But there's a chemistry as to why that happens. You think making whiskey is an art? It's a chemistry. It's a science. I used to tell paper people, you think making paper is an art? It's a science. There's a reason why it turns out the way it does. You haven't figured out all the scientific reasons why the whiskey tastes the way it does or why it doesn't taste the way it does. It's funny. I'm not supposed to be pointing at people, and I'm sitting here pointing at people with a pen. That's bad. All right, I'm going to put that down. I'm getting on my soapbox here. So I told you to wind me up. You got me wound up. So, so I remember telling them, like, the thing is, you've got to figure out the chemistry. There's no reason it should take an operator 2 or 3 years to learn how to run your process. There should be a scientific way that if you do these things, then the whiskey is going to taste a certain way. It just should happen. You should be able to physically explain it. And you can't, because your SMEs are, they're either not transferring their knowledge, or like, this is the way we've always done it, and it's just by feel and all that. Right? So I've been playing golf again after a 2-year hiatus. I've played golf since I was 11. I took lessons when I was young. I was number one player on a golf team in high school. I mean, I played at for most amateurs, a relatively high level for a really long time. I generally score in the 70s. The thing is if you asked me to teach you how to play, I would be horrible at it, because it comes so natural to me after so many years. Like, I don't really even think about anything. I set up, I'm like, okay, is my grip right, posture right, alignment right, ball position right? Okay, if all those things are right, swing away. What do you think about them? Nothing. If I'm doing well, nothing. Just hit it. That's all I'm thinking about. So it's a very natural thing. So you think about those people that have been working in the plant for 30 years. They're like that too. Well, how do you know that machine or that process isn't being? I just do, I do. Like, you ask me, well, how'd you hit that, that draw right there, from 140 yards with a pitching wedge into that pin? I don't know. I just did it, I hit it. And so there's a challenge right now in that we have a lot of SMEs who just know how to do stuff. And it's really difficult to pull their knowledge out. And case in point, I won't give the customer away, but there was a customer of mine that was trying to do that with some of their SMEs. And he said it was like pulling teeth. He said it was like we were asking questions like in another language. Mm-hmm. Like, they were not understanding what we were after. And he said, because they had asked, like, we want some dashboards that have these things on it and these kind of color codes, and they will really help us do our job. So they delivered that. SMEs were like really happy. Hey, this is great. And so this team went back to him and said, okay, so we've delivered that. Now what do you do with this? Like, how do you know, like, which processes you need to go work on and what might be wrong? Like, what are the calculations you run? What are the things you're looking for? Like, how do you know? What do you do? And they were like, well, we just needed these dashboards. Like, what do you mean? Like, we just go do our work. But don't you like run some calculations? Like, what's your thought process? And there was a disconnect in what they were asking for and what the SMEs were saying. It's kind of like me with my golf swing. Well, Jim, do you take the club back inside? Where is it? At this point, like, I don't know. I hit the ball. I don't know. I just analyzed this process and, I fixed the issue. I've been doing it for 30 years. I don't know. And I think that's a disconnect we somehow have to fix. And I think through data, in these dashboards and stuff like that, and these calculations, like, he said, the customer's like, we just went back and regrouped. We're like, we're going to re-ask those questions in a different way that we think maybe they'll understand. And then be like, oh, okay, now I get it. Because I think you really want to appeal to their legacy, like for me, like if I'm not going to try to teach someone how to play golf, like how to swing the golf club. Now, I might teach them how to hit certain shots because I do have some thought processes on those. There are certain things I'm pretty good at teaching, but I know I'm like really bad at that. And so I think, how do you get those things where you can draw out like what they know and draw out as much of that knowledge as they can versus some of it's just instinct and experience. And I think that's a real challenge, but I think, data and transmitting all that through data is a really important tool on how to do that. So anyway, hey, you got me wound up. Got on my rant. Here's what's funny. So Dave's been asking me about, shooting this video for probably 3 weeks now.
At least.
Because I told him, hey, I'm going to shoot this video, and I was just going to be me talking in the camera. I couldn't wind myself up, and I couldn't figure out how to start. So you got me started. So thank you. Got the speaker's block out, not writer's block, speaker's block.
Jim, everything that you're saying makes sense. And I think one of the pathways to bridging this gap between the SMEs that we currently have and the SMEs of the future is going to be through data. And it's going to, as you said, kind of like asking the questions, if not, how do you do this specific thing, as in take me through a process. And if companies like Industrial Insight can go through and we can build dashboards and we can go and do some amount of automation and visualization that we know we're going to need for everything, it's going to it's going to be much simpler for the next group to come through to understand what they need to do. And hopefully they won't take, 3 years like the people of the Jack Daniel's distillery would in order to learn the very specific things. Because so much of this, as you said, it's much more of a science than an art. And if we can lay out what the science looks like and give people parameters, it will be much easier for them to go through and learn what they need to learn. I would also say that, historically, especially in the last 10 years, people are staying at jobs a significantly less period of time, significantly less.
I was just about to start talking about this. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, so they're staying at their jobs significantly less, which means we have significantly less amounts of time in order to get people both up to speed and get value from them in the position before they're, at least in theory, going to leave. And we've got to start the process all over again. So we have to find a way to expedite the process.
So interesting you bring that up. So we've got a customer that is in a rural part of a state. Okay, I don't want to talk too much about who they are, where they're at. But one of their challenges is recruiting and retaining engineers. So if you look, they've got left now, and this has changed probably threefold over the last 3 years. Maybe on the engineering side, maybe 2 or 3 guys that have been around for 20, 30 years, right? And they've already both said, hey, we're retiring here. So some of the engineers we're working with, are in their mid-20s, and they're like, I don't see them staying at that plant 20 years. They're not going to want to stay out there. This is a stepping stone for them. And there's one that actually, he's from the area, so he's probably going to stick around, right? He'll end up becoming potentially one of those. If he decides he's going to stick around in engineering, well, what if he wants to get on the business side? As he grows and matures, and 10 years from now, he's like, man, I've done everything in engineering. I don't want to just sit here and do this like that anymore. I want to get more on the business side, into management and all that. I don't want to be the subject matter expert. To your point, we're, especially in rural America, where a lot of our manufacturing is, how are we going to recruit and retain this engineering talent and grow them into the subject matter experts? Because we're only going to have them in those roles where they can be the subject matter expert for 2 to 5 years. And then they're going to want to move on. They're going to get restless. I mean, we see that in the younger generations. In the millennial generation, we see that. I have two millennials that work for me. I've told them both, like right now, they're very happy, very content being the technical guru. 5 or 10 years from now, they may or may not be there. They may decide, I want to do something a little different. I may or may not have that opportunity for them. So I have that same challenge. I look at this, I'm like, if I'm, say, a paper mill out in the middle of nowhere, I bring in a young engineer out of college to work with someone who's been there for 25 years. And then all of a sudden the 25-year person retires in 2 years. Then that young engineer has 2 years of experience, who's gotten 2 years of crossover, poor tools to really be able to do the same kind of work that 25-year veteran does. They get frustrated, or they get restless, or somebody comes along and gives them a better offer in a city. They go take it. Now, what are you going to backfill that with? It's going to be somebody, maybe from the same industry, from another plant, who's willing to make that move, or, another young up and comer, or I don't know. That's why I'm saying I think we're going to run worse despite all the technology, because we haven't done that crossover. And I think the being able to train and attract and retain talent is going to be an issue for years to come. Things are way different now. You mentioned it just in that last question. People are not staying in the same role nearly as long. Especially in the millennial generation, they want to move around and experience different things, and it's not always even about moving up. It's about experiencing different things. They don't really know. When I was 25 years old, I told this young guy yesterday, he was 27. I was like, man, when I was 27, if you had told me in 19 years, you were going to start a company that is analyzing time series data, I would have laughed. I would have said, "You're crazy." I would have never thought I was going to go into sales when I took my first role. Like, I'm not going to do the sales gig, but I wanted to go experience it. And so I think that's going to be a challenge too, is we're not going to have engineers that want to stay in those engineering disciplines long enough to become those subject matter expertise. So how do we handle that? And the thing is, I think, again, we get back to this remote data and being able to do things from anywhere. They might be much more willing to do it if you don't stick me out in Timbuktu, Alabama or Georgia or Michigan, or, an hour and a half from the closest city.
Mm-hmm.
I can live wherever. I can go visit the plant from time to time to get that face-to-face interaction and build those relationships, but I can do my job. I think that's a piece of it for sure. I don't know if it solves it, but it's a piece.
No, I would completely agree with that. And it's not even like completely rural American manufacturing that has this issue. So, Jim, as you know, I grew up in Western New York outside of Buffalo.
Yeah.
And I have, for basically my entire life, watched my dad struggle to attract people that would be those SMEs to come to what, compared to the vast majority of places we've talked about, is a city. You can live in
but
the
it's
suburbs.
In the tundra. It's like, I don't want to live with 200 inches of snow.
No, exactly. I mean, it's only about 120 growing up is about what we average. So only like 10 feet of
200, it doesn't matter. 2 million, it's way more than a couple of snowstorms a year.
No, but that exactly is like the reason that he had historically struggled to attract people and struggled to find people who were going to stay long term. And so I think it's a struggle across the board. And as you said, the working remotely is a big boon, especially not only can you pull in people who are young engineers that are going to want the opportunity to travel around, but maybe we can convince that 25-year, that 40-year engineer who he and his wife just want to retire and move to Florida, that, hey, you can continue to work remotely. We'll set you up with everything that you need. There'll probably be a bunch of tech support because it will be new, but at least, even maybe part-time or contractually, we can pull on that wealth of knowledge, and you can continue to spread that knowledge to new engineers.